All right, good afternoon and welcome everyone. We are pleased to host the first session of our Career and Public Service Professional Development Series of Beyond 120. I'm Monica Cavalcante, the Events and Communications Intern at the Graham Center and host for today's session. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's guest is Jerry Bruno, a Gator grad and Graham Center alum. Mr. Bruno has joined us today to speak with us about his experience at UF and in city government that prepared him for his current role with the Government Innovations team at Bloomberg Philanthropies. As an undergrad at UF, Jerry was selected to participate in the Bob Graham Center for Public Service Tallahassee Internship Program. He was a Graham Civic Scholar and completed the center's public leadership minor. Following graduation, he moved to New York City and he was selected as a New York City Urban Fellow. He has since served in multiple positions within New York City government, and he's now at Bloomberg Philanthropies. So welcome, Jerry. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And the floor is yours.
Well, hey, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So this will be helpful is to kind of give like a brief background who I am and then really spend the bulk of the time for you to ask me questions as well. So as Anna mentioned, I was a Gator grad, graduated 2012, and my journey in public service really started when I being a Graham Center minor. I did an internship in Tallahassee. To give you some context, how old I am. In 2011, Governor Rick Scott was just inaugurated. And I just remember our faculty member was Mike Herodopoulos, who was the Senate president at the time, and he was our faculty member at the Bob Graham Center. And a group of us met with Governor Scott, and I was just really very interesting governor and his policies in terms of what he envisioned for the state of Florida. And that made me realize the power of government, right? You know, there's government, there's politics, but government institutions really impact your daily lives as well. And regardless of your politics of Democrat or Republican, independent or not, you know, that was a very valuable, interesting experience for me being in Tallahassee. That year, we did not have an on-time budget. There was just so much discord in the state legislature in 2011, but it really showed me the power of government impacting people's lives. So I came back my senior year and I applied for the New York City Urban Fellows program, and Dr. Sheila Dickinson is on the call. I remember like it was yesterday. Application was due that Friday, first week of January, and I was in Dr. D's office doing most round of edits. And one thing, some feedback for you, as you apply for fellowships, you apply for jobs, specificity is important. I think what's been really helpful in my career trajectory is that if you can really nail down why you want this job, why are you applying for Rhodes Scholarship? Why are you applying for UDAL? Why are you applying for Urban Fellows? It can't be vague, oh, because I want to have impact. That's pretty broad, but specificity is like, I want to have impact to do X, Y, and Z. And I think Dr. D, you know, those revisions were quite painful, but it really made me realize that was a good learning lesson for me, that anytime I apply for something, I need to ask myself why and how specific I can be as well. Graduated 2012, you know, moved to New York, and I worked in New York City government for 9 years. So I straddled both the Bloomberg administration and the de Blasio. Working in government is an acquired taste. It's not for everyone. There's the joy and frustration, but I started at the Department of Small Business Services. When I started in 2012, Superstorm Sandy impacted the whole tri-state region. And that was the first time I really saw upfront how city government respond to the needs of residents. You know, there was no power in all of Lower Manhattan. You know, my job function changed as an urban fellow as well. And I really felt the power of city government and part of why I stayed for so long. I was there at a unique time. We were at Michael Bloomberg's last New York City Urban Fellows class. The mayor transitioned out in 2013. Seeing a mayoral transition after 12 years with Bloomberg was fascinating, eye-opening. And then I went to the Department of Homeless Services, and I was there for the bulk of my time in government. That really grounded me. When you work on behalf of poor New Yorkers or those experiencing homelessness or those who are most marginalized, or those who are most vulnerable, it really kind of grounds you in what the role of government is. Is government there to help everyone? I believe that. Is government there to really provide for everyone to the best of your ability? I believe that as well. So that job really grounded me in the way I see the world, the way I see the role of government, helping those who are most marginalized and really thinking, how do you really move people who are extremely poor to the middle class? That's quite difficult, and there's a lot of government programs with alignment to make that happen. I live in New York. I was here during the pandemic, and New York State, New York City particularly, was really impacted by COVID. And that I really saw government step up again with another crisis. Everyone had stepped up across the world, but in New York City in particular, I lived in a neighborhood called Jackson Heights, Queens, and we were the epicenter of the world. I mean, of COVID cases and people who were just dying. And it felt like the apocalypse. And I worked every day. I started working remotely March 18th. I worked every day till July 1, Monday through Sunday. And it really showed me that public servants are really what kept you safe, what kept, so much of us kept just really safe, right? And kept going as well. And I really felt the power of my colleagues that really stepped into the plate. Then, I think another tad bit, you should think about your career. Like, what do you really want for your career? I was very a planner. I'm very type A. So I always saw my career in a triangle: government, philanthropy, and business. And I said, like, at what point in my career do I want to make those transitions? And I think I developed enough skill sets along the way. I did fellowships in between. Over the years while I worked in government, and said, I want to transition to philanthropy. And I looked at opportunities at the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller, and then I thought Bloomberg Philanthropies had a great opportunity to be on the government innovation team at Bloomberg Philanthropies. So I began that interview process, and I started last November at Bloomberg Philanthropies. So what I do at philanthropy, I manage two programs with my colleagues. One is called the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative. And think about it this way, it's an executive management program where we help train mayors to be better city leaders. As you guys know, 1/3 of the world lives in cities, and having strong mayoral leadership is so critical. And, Mike was a very strong mayor, and he really believed that, it's really the mayors that are at the forefront of helping residents as well. And I think that was a contrast to my tenure in Tallahassee. It felt kind of very far removed from people. Like, I think the higher you go up in government, there could be a disconnect a little bit. I want something more localized as well. And like cities are a creature of the state. So cities have to deal with state oversight boards and all these things, but I think cities are really at the heart of really helping its residents. My other program is called What Works Cities. So how do cities globally use data and evidence to make better decisions for their residents as well? So working at philanthropy is really cool. We're all in this virtual environment. I've never been to the office before, so I'm looking forward to seeing what my office looks like, meeting my colleagues in person as well. That's another life skill, being flexible. I think along my career, I think being flexible is really important, and seizing opportunities as well. So one thing I would say to you is, like, if you think about what do you want to do after UF, or just be flexible to new opportunities. The New York City Urban Fellows Program was one great opportunity, but a lot of my friends did Teach for America. Other people did Fulbright. But think about, what do you want for your career? And it's okay if you don't have all the answers figured out. So my honors advisor, Reagan's on the call. She would say, you're young. you don't have to have all the answers figured out, and that's okay. And I think that's I was such a plan. I want to do this, this, and this, but it's also said, what? I was only like 21 years old. Like, I have a full life to live, and I can just take my time as well. So I encourage you to say, just take your time trying to figure it out as well, and do what you really like. I really like public service and believe in what it stands for. But if you like singing, go and join a rock band. If you want to be a painter, do things that live your dream and not so much other people's dreams for you. I think that kind of captures quickly who I am. And I just want to say one thing before we go to questions. I just want to thank my professors at the Graham Center, like Dr. D and Reagan. Like, I just keep saying, I tell people this all the time. You two really had a big impact in my career trajectory at UF and beyond. So thanks for being my professors and also being my colleagues and friends. With that, I'll answer questions or turn it over to Anna.
Thank you so much, Jerry. That was such an interesting insight of how you connected, being at UF. And then I'm so interested in hearing more about your experience during the pandemic. What were you, I don't see any questions in the chat yet, so I'm going to take advantage and ask you a question. What were you working with? And I guess, how has that been an experience in your career?
Yeah, so I was at the Department of Homeless Services during the pandemic. And, part of, when CDC guidelines came out, I started at DHS in the Division of Family Services, and I moved to the executive office where I manage our program called Thrive NYC. So I was the lead for our agency, which is really the city's public commitment to change the conversation around mental health. And then I was also lead for youth homelessness as well. and other projects as well. One thing in government, you would never have, you do so much work. It's like, it's just so fascinating how much work you take on. So what we had to do at DHS, we had to move people from shelter to hotels because, shelter is conjugate living. So we had to move families and individual and single adults to hotels. And that's a huge undertaking. I mean, that is my colleagues to get people, and you think about the process, right? Like getting people from shelter, getting them, tracking them, putting them on a bus, getting them to the hotel was not easy. So that was a huge effort. So I worked with our isolation hotels. I was calling nurses every day, where is this client at? Make sure they have their medication, because there were so many things changing what COVID is and is not. If you had like pre-existing condition, you want to make sure that you were connected as well. So that was really a huge undertaking. It was also pretty stress producing and very emotionally draining. So something you think about in your career, as much as I love public service, I knew it was time for me to really transition. I think for me was more about what are the things in life that really matter? I think the pandemic kind of really illuminated this for me. It's like, I love public service, but I just cannot give my everything to it, right? Because I'm sacrificing my mental health, my physical activity as well. So if you think about your career trajectory, I have friends that work on finance, they work so many hours and they're miserable, but they make a lot of money. Do you want that for your career? Or people who are artists who are struggling, but they feel they're doing what they want to do as well. It's all about finding that sweet spot and what you can do. I was in government for almost 9 years, so clearly I loved it and I made some sacrifices, but just kind of know like your individual well-being and how you show up for yourself is also equally important.
Thank you. And I just want to reiterate, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand, and you can unmute yourself and ask them directly to Jerry. Since I don't see any yet, I'll keep asking you questions. I guess what skills do you think are essential to succeed in a public service career? Since you've been, in it for so long, you said 9 years. What have you felt over those years have been the most useful?
I think it's really the soft skills. I mean, obviously you're in an academic environment, so you take the fundamental course of like your poli-sci class or history course or whatever major you are, which gets you your degree at UP, which is important. But I think in the workplace, I think what people really care about, like, are you a team player? Because nobody wants to work with someone who is arrogant or cocky. And I have had managers and colleagues who do those things. But I think for the most part, are you someone that's a team player? Are you willing to really step up to the plate when needed? Are you willing to kind of adapt? I always say one of my superpowers is being a team player, right? And I mean, I've worked on so many teams across government. Some were more uphill battles, but at the end of the day, I always say truth. I'm here because I want to have an impact on my fellow New Yorkers, and never lose sight of your North Star, like why you're there as well. So that's one of the things I would say. Like, are you a team player? Are you someone that can receive feedback, constructive feedback? I've had managers who gave me real constructive feedback. Says, Jerry, you did this, but this is a better approach. And sometimes I didn't want to hear it, but I always found it constructive as well. Are you someone that is patient? I think that's really helpful at times, and thinking about, in government, things do not move quickly. I mean, you're talking about, especially New York City, it's a huge bureaucracy. As much as things want to happen quickly, it doesn't move. So are you patient it's a long game. No, it's not always a short game as well. I think Gus has a question. GUS, if I think correctly. Okay, hi.
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Jerry, for taking the opportunity to speak to us. I guess my question is, what advice do you have for someone who's either graduating or about to graduate UF and, try to break into the public sector and in that type of industry, because it's extremely competitive. And so based on your experience and on what you've learned, what kind of advice do you have?
Yeah, I agree. I got my job in New York City government because I did a program called the New York City Urban Fellows Program. So that was really my pipeline to get into city government. Otherwise, across the country and the world, their governments are under tremendous financial constraints, right? To really hire, but they're always hiring, right? I also think some opportunity to think about posts is like, do you want to do a fellowship? Do you want to do like a Fulbright? Do you want to do an urban fellowship? Do you want to Teach for America? Because these are things that are public service core, these are more public sector focus as well. But even stepping back, like what are you passionate about? What's the thing that keeps you up at night? Because that will help kind of guide you in the direction, in terms of what you want to do. Some people knew like, I don't do public service, I want to do finance, right? And they go that route as well. So I think, or maybe some folks will just say, I'm going to like volunteer and see that turns an opportunity as well. So those are the type of things I will say to you or anyone looking to graduate, still trying to be on this job search, how to break in. Also, the basic, just apply. I mean, it makes sense. Does it go, does my application go in a black hole if I apply for the federal government or the state government or the local? People do read it. And I think you just never know when the opportunity will present itself as well. So that's something you could pursue as well.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome, Gus.
Thank you. So we have a couple questions in the chat, and I'll read them out. If any of the people that are asked those questions would like to also ask them out loud, feel free to. But we have one from Aisha, and it's tips for those who do not exactly know where to start in government and public service. She's thinking about law school after undergraduate, but from there, not really sure, playing things by ear. So do you have any tips for those who are not exactly sure where to start in government?
Yeah, you know, law school, I remember Reagan, this was a couple years ago, but like, I thought I would go to law school and I took a Socratic seminar class and I hated it. So I think taking courses at UF will really expose you like, do I want to be a lawyer and do this type of, and have my brain think this particular way? I hated that course. I didn't even do well in that course at all. So it's okay not having all the interests figured out as well. If you know you want to just, I think more broadly, there's ways to have impact in the world without going through government. And I think that's also helpful. So if you want to do social impact work, right? Or if you want to do not-for-profit work, or even people in finance, you know, there's opportunity to do good as well. That still works for the government, you get the opportunity. Put it this way, government regulates our daily lives. So anything that you're doing, whatever sector you're in, you're working with government, right? If you think about the roads you drive on, your air quality, your water, that's all regulated by government as well. So you're interacting with government. The question becomes, on what side of the table do you want to be? Do you want to be the regulator? Do you want to be the one that's really helping people as well? Do you want to be on the front lines of those experiencing homelessness? Do you want to help those who are about to have eviction accord? So that's why I go back to, what are you passionate about, right? And if you care about the arts, there's a whole arts department in government, right? One of my colleagues at Bloomberg Associates, Kate Levin, she was there for so many years, you know, as the commissioner, and like, you know, how arts and cities are just so critical and how you advance those projects as well. So I think, what are you passionate about? And then figure, okay, I'm passionate about X, Y, and Z. And then what are the industries that kind of I like or don't like? And then kind of do that. So I think internships and fellowships provide a great opportunity for you to explore that. Because you may think, oh, I want to work at JP Morgan and do social impact work, then you hate it, right? And then that's good to know, because at least you know you try it out and you can do something differently.
Definitely. Dr. D put in a question. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask it directly, please feel free. But if not, I can also ask it.
Here I am. And that is, Jerry, I wonder how you managed to stay so upbeat when, particularly for those 9 years you were working with the homeless, you know, which I presume sometimes was extremely depressing. And in a general way, in a job, you know, how can you manage to keep on an even keel? Thanks.
Yeah, I'm a really positive person. You know, the world has challenges, you know, especially like last year with the pandemic and the conversation around Black Lives Matter and the frustration of living in a country that doesn't always treat everyone equal and fair. When I started at DHS, right after when Mike Bloomberg left and de Blasio came in, I started at DHS December of 2014, and there was a child fatality. And I just remember my boss, I was in his office and he was so shooken up, and he said, you know, we really have to, when people who experience homelessness come to our system, we have to protect them. We have to do all that we can, from our providers to our partners, to ensure that, because I think about a loss of life, you know, in shelter, it's like, what happened? Like, what along life really brought around this? It really humanizes you and grounds you and makes you realize I have all these privileges, but there are those who just do not as well. That sustains me to know, like, at the end of the day, when I think I'm having a bad day because, you know, I didn't get the iPhone 12, I had to wait in line, or it puts in perspective at times. That's keeping me upbeat. I think another thing, I work with colleagues who spent their whole life in government. I think I remain so, in people, there's a lot of, there's a negative connotation that, oh, you're a lifer in government, you're just a union person. But my colleagues who've been in government, even before I was born, like just 31 years ago, still working, they inspire me. You know, they decided that this is going to be their profession for the rest of their life, because they believe that I play a small role in helping fellow New Yorkers or fellow people in Florida. And I think that was really inspiring, encouraging to me. So when I think, oh my God, 9 years is a long time, 35 years is a long time, 50 years is a long time. And I think that's really encouraging. And you should never discount that effort because they have so much institutional knowledge. When one of my colleagues I remember when Ed Koch was mayor. I was like, what? You're still around when Ed Koch was mayor? I couldn't believe, I was mortified. Like, and you to hear this history, it keeps me so upbeat to have this person trying to share this knowledge as well. I think another thing that keeps me upbeat, I'm in a dynamic city. Like, if you guys have not been to New York is like, it's going to come back. I think about the Great Depression and what followed the Roaring 20s. Like, that's New York right now. Like, this summer is going to be the word lit in New York. And I kind of think, like, to be in a city where it's like, we're the largest in America. Our budgets are larger than some states and some countries, right? And to be part of a team at City Hall or an agency that's really working on fellow New Yorkers is just so inspiring, and it keeps you motivated. Like, when I tell my friends, oh, Jerry, like, it's not the DMV's office, right? It's like there are people who are helping businesses get back on their feet. There are people who are helping those homeless get an apartment, people who are connecting to arts as well. It's just such a dynamic place to be in. And that keeps me so motivated. And for me, I love city government for those reasons. Like, no day was the same, was totally different as well. But let me just say, like, even in Gainesville, right? There's a city government in Gainesville. It's also dynamic as well. The whole downtown area has changed, right? Like, when I was there, the Swamp Restaurant was there. Now it's different, right? I think there are people in government who think about what does it look like to have a very dynamic Gainesville, right? How do you really blend this idea of economic development, like through the university that brings all this revenue, but it's also like Alachua County, other parts. How do you make sure that economic prosperity cuts across that? That's government. There is someone who sits at city planning and thinks about these things about their own city. So I encourage you to think, like, if you want to get involved, why the downtown like that? Get involved with your government, get involved with your community boards as well, get involved with local activism, because we really do dictate how you want government to show up for you. I think Reagan has a question. I think you're on mute, Reagan.
Hi, Jerry. Nice to see
So
you.
good to see you too.
So I have a question going back to undergraduate. You talked about the Graham Center and the leadership minor I think you earned. I don't know how much, I'm curious more about your undergraduate degree, your BS, and how much, if at all, that was a preparation for this career, because I think, for the students in the call, there is often a thought of like, that's going to be my job forever. Whatever my degree is going to define me. And if you could talk a little bit about how connected yours is or isn't to the work you've been doing.
So I was a public relations major and I minored in public leadership. And in public relations, you're a major. If you're a current major, you do a lot of writing. I remember the alligator. There's so many. He had a pitch story. Said, "Oh my God," to the alligator in the Gainesville Sun. But to answer Reagan's question, I don't know how much of my degree I really use today. I think there's some fundamental, like, writing. I mean, I think that cuts across any industry. Are you able to communicate both verbally or just write? And I think the amount of writing stories I did really prepared me, because I wrote so many briefs and memos in my current job as well. And I think, Reagan, you have a really good question. Like, if you want to go to med school, I think you should be taking the appropriate courses requirement to get into med school as well. Or if you want to be an engineer, there's some math or science we get to take. But I kind of think those industries really want diverse voices. So if you're like an art major and you're taking some engineering courses with engineering school, that's okay as well, right? Because I think what's most transferable to my earlier points, like, how do you show up as an individual? Are you someone that's workable? Can people work with you? Are you relatable? Are you someone that's a thinker? Are you someone that offers ideas? Are you someone that can take feedback? I think those soft skills are super helpful. At the end of the day, like, to be an urban fellow, I needed a bachelor's degree. So as a baseline, I had to finish UF and do that. But I think beyond that, no one ever asked, were you in the honors program, or did you get research published, or did you exam? No one really cares about that. I mean, for your resume, it's nice, but as you get in the working world, it's more about like, okay, what have you done at work that you can quantify? And Dr. D will always say, like, make sure it's quantifiable. What's the number? You can't be like, oh, I help people. How much people you help? Because I think employers want to see that, like, you're able to quantify your experiences. So I wrote 15 memos for a state senator in Florida. And that, I mean, it gets people to kind of, it gives them like a depth and a breadth of like, oh, this person is able to take on lots of work as well. Or do you currently, I worked at Old Navy and I was a cashier and I was like, I would always have to supervise 3 people, right? And that was on my resume at one point, right? That kind of thing, those experiences also are what employers are looking for as well. But at the baseline, just finish UF and graduate, but no one cared if you were summa cum laude, all these things, because when you're in the real world, there's other people who have those same things. You're not really, it's no longer like a competition, like, you're not applying for roles or UDAL. It's more like now it's like, how are you as a working professional? Are you are you hireable? Do you articulate well? Do you write well? Do you present yourself in a way that's a value proposition to this other company?
Thank you. Definitely important things to think about. Thank you for that. I have a couple direct messages.
Yeah.
And the first was, what courses, personal experiences, and extracurricular involvements in undergrad led you to your specific passion? And I guess we'll ask the second part afterwards because there's 2.
Yeah, I was an orientation leader. Have you guys, everyone have gone through preview that's still around? I mean, I'm just, I haven't been back to UF for almost 8, 9 years. So I was orientation leader, and that was really, that's where I met Reagan, I met my mom, but orientation staff was really fun. It was really one of those type of soft skills, like how you interact with lots of people, working on a team. I didn't realize how that's simple. I work on so many teams now where I currently work at, and I think, you know, there's different personalities, and it's like, you have to really balance. It's like, people do things differently, try to get to the same end goals. I think that was really helpful. I did research. I kind of like that process of research. I just learning something new and doing that. I did first year Florida, which I really enjoyed doing that as well. So I think opportunity to really interact with more people really caught me on the career trajectory. But I'm more of an extrovert, but it's okay for an introvert, because I had friends who were more like, I'm more of an introvert. I like to do maybe the math and sciences, or just like do salsa dancing as well. And they gain a couple of skill sets those ways as well. So yes, I think those are the type of activities I did in undergrad. And I was really involved in the Graham Center, right? So the Graham Center, I really did enjoy like being a scholar, going to Tallahassee. If you have an opportunity to, if it's Tallahassee programs, I think that was really valuable for me, and really kind of showed me like, do I want to do this or not? And as much as I thought for literature could have been much better and in so many fronts, I think that was a very valuable experience for me.
And so the second part of it was, what advice do you have for someone with lots of different interests as far as a career?
At some point, I think, and this is an analogy, one of my professors was like, so this, you like all these things, right? And then as you get close to graduation, you like 10 things. Then you like your senior, you like 5 things. And then what are 3 things? Because I do think if you like so many things, then it's like, how do you ever decide what to act on and do next, right? So I think if you know 3 things that like, I care about art, I care about public service, and I care about waterboarding, right? And like, how do you really mirror those things together? Or maybe it's about a timing, right? You know, maybe I start with art, try it out. If I don't do that, do this as well. I think the more diversified your experiences are, the more exposure you have to new opportunities as well. But you just can't be, even for employers, I think about it this way, from an employer standpoint, Jerry, in 30 seconds, you know, what's the value proposition you bring to Bloomberg Philanthropies? And it's like, you can't say, well, I will bring this, and this, like, especially like I bring 9 solid years of working government experience, right? You know, having worked under 2 mayoral administrations, having done policy, operations, and management, this I bring to the government team. Specificity and being very clear as well. So I do think as you get older and more mature in your experiences and have just more underneath your belt, it's really important to kind of start honing on, what do you communicate to people when they ask you, what do you bring to the table? What do you care about, right? And it can't be like 5 things. Well, I care about these 3 things, and for these reasons, and why.
We have another question from Dr. D, and it's, isn't it intimidating to think about working and living in New York? How can one overcome one's fears?
I think leaving Florida was really good for me. I always saw myself as more like a world citizen, right? I think for me, I see the world, I see New York as being the melting pot of the world. It's like, if you really want to be exposed to different cultures, foods, and experiences, New York's the place as well. But there's also parts of Florida that can also provide that as well. So sometimes all they do, like, go out and leave Florida, but there are people who stayed in Florida and got their roots here in Miami or Tallahassee, whatever as well. Answer the New York question, it is overwhelming. I would say my first year in New York was like, oh boy, I didn't make a lot of money. I was on a public service budget. So something to talk about, sometimes it's kind of taboo to talk about salary and stuff, but public service is great, but it's not always the most lucrative profession. So I had scholarships in undergrad, which really helped me prepare to move to New York as well. But kind of think about after you leave, if you have so much debt, can you really balance doing public service or forgiveness programs as well? But yeah, New York is, I think, once you make it in New York, then you make it anywhere, right? So I've been in New York 9 years. I'm a New Yorker now. I have a New York driver's license. Like, I have made it, but I can see some people not making it because it's just so overwhelming as well. And that's okay. But you should try it out. You should even visit as well if that's something you want to explore, like the Northeast region. I think weather matters. It gets really cold in New York, but with climate change, that's that's changing, unfortunately. So something to think about. But I would say, like with any environment, if it's New York, California, Texas, North Dakota, wherever, really ask yourself, what do you hope to gain with that from that experience? And you try it out. And if you don't like it, if you have roots in Florida, somewhere you can always return back.
Certainly. And we have another question from Andy. And he asked, you just spoke about the importance of being able to write and communicate. Do you think those communication skills for a career in public service can be built in the classroom via writing essays and participating in class, or does it require us jumping into our communities and looking beyond the walls of the classroom?
It's both, right? I do think every job I have done, I've done, when I applied for the Urban Fellows program, I had to submit a resume and do a writing sample. And most fellowships I applied for had required a writing sample. But I do get it. It's annoying writing those essays or those group projects. I was never like, oh, what's the end goal of this chiffoonery, this nonsense? But in hindsight, I do think employers, if there's errors on your resume, people will stop reading it. If you have typos in your essay, if you're applying for something, people will not read it as well. So I think as long as you could perfect those essays and make sure that they are ready to submit in a way that's edited and reviewed, that's really great as well. On the flip side of the coin, it is about having outside the classroom. So it just wasn't enough for me just to excel academically. It's what I did outside of as well. So being part of the Graham Center, going to Tallahassee, right, doing research, it showed someone that I'm multifaceted, right? Jerry can be a writer and he has academic acumen. He also can do research and he's a critical thinker. He's someone that could be on orientation staff. He's able to really have people management skills as well. He could work at Old Navy and really manage people as well. So when employers think about someone holistic, they're looking for a particular skill set. And if they could find someone who's diverse in their experience and bring them to the table, that makes you stand out. The reality is when you apply for something, there's lots of people applying for it. So what makes you different than your counterpart? And you should always think about, but on the flip side of that, and Reagan always say, don't be involved in everything. So that's the balance, right? If your resume is like, I'm involved in 10 clubs, how can you be involved in 10 clubs and be effective? Do at least 3 clubs and take a leadership role and say, I'm the president of Florida Blue Key, or I am a Cicerone, or I'm these things. And then it shows the employer, oh, they really not only applied for it or got involved, they really kind of took on leadership roles. And I think that's the secret sauce, right? Showing an employer that you put some time in investments. At the Graham Center, I was a minor, did research, I went to Tallahassee. So when I was talking about what the Graham Center meant for me, I did all these different programs as well. I just didn't just show up to Tallahassee and do other things, didn't do other things as well. So always find that balance, because if you're doing too much, it's like, did you really do a deeper dive as well? So I always try to find that balance. And someone had a question around tips for applying for scholarships. Is that the next one, Anna?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tips for, I guess it's a nice bridge.
Yeah, Aisha, am I saying your name correctly? Ayesha? Yes, I think so. Okay. This is a lesson that was just so true from like Dr. D. When you apply for anything, so you guys may be in your sophomore year, junior, or senior year, if you're applying for Rhodes, if you're applying for UDAL, if you're applying for Marshall, if you're applying for Urban Fellow, Peace Corps, any one of those programs or fellowships or scholarships, specificity. And you need to ask yourself, why are you applying for Rhodes? Are you applying for Rhodes because someone at UF got it last year? That's a bad reason. Are you applying for Rhodes because you have the particular talent that's going to be valuable, that you want to get a master at Oxford? I think something that work internally and asking yourself, like, why? And this just really helps. There are things that I thought I want to apply for. Is like, oh, because someone I really admired, Adam and Mary, did it. So I want to be this. Or I was like, well, then that's Adam's story. That's Adam's trajectory. That's not Jerry's trajectory as well. So I think doing the internal work. I think any scholarship committee can read very quickly, like, oh, you just apply because you people can read very quickly why you're applying or not applying for the right reasons as well. And I think when I think about the fellowship I've done in New York, I was always clear, like I applied for Urban Fellows because I really wanted to take the experience I had in Tallahassee and my volunteerism and apply that in a global context and a large city like New York. Specificity. When I applied for the program at NYU, I wanted to really deepen my public service skills. When I applied for New Year's Council, I really wanted to understand what it's like to interface with elected officials in government, right? When I applied for a council urban professional, I wanted to be in a network with predominantly people of color to elevate my mid-career skill sets, right? And I applied for Bloomberg Philanthropies, I want to be on the government innovation team to really do these sort of things. So along the journey, it's all about specificity and really drilling down as well. Because you have to defend that. Someone's gonna ask you, so Jerry, so why are you applying here? And if someone can tell very quickly if you're like, well, I'm applying because it's a cool opportunity. That's the wrong answer. I'm applying because this is what I bring to the table and this is how I can really help your organization when I'm a good fit for this program.
Thank you for that. Honestly, I'm going into my senior years. These are super helpful tips. And something also very similar is, do you have any opportunities for mentorship in your career?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So I have had great mentors. I got 2 scholarships. I was a Gates Millennium Scholar, and then I was also a Horatio Alger Scholar. And someone at the Gates Millennium Scholars Program, was my mentor, and he was really just paramount. I think having mentors that are, I would say mentors I have like mentors for different reasons, but there's mentors for like personal reasons, like, what it's like to be a Black queer man, and navigating the workspace a little bit and navigating the world. And also mentors are for like just academic purposes, right? Or I see Reagan or Dr. Diaz, right? I'm thinking about applying for this, what do you think? Or mentors that think about, I want to talk about life, but I think there's mentors that serve different purposes as well. Mentorship does take time because what you put in, and it really does matter. And it can't be just always one way. So I just don't email Reagan or Dr. D when I need something. I say, okay, Reagan in New York, let's grab coffee or tea, right? I think that's what really strengthens the relationship. Like one of my mentors is Dr. Clay Calvert at the J School, and we keep in touch all the time. And hey, Dr. Calvert, you just got Teacher of the Year, congratulations, right? I think that goes a long way in mentorship, because I think you have to feel like you're putting in as much energy and time as well. So if you think about mentorships, like how do you show up, what are your needs, and how do you support them as well, which I think is the strongest mentorship connections.
So I guess similar to that is, what specific advice do you have for maintaining networks, not just mentorship, but networks in general, networks of contact?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much groups out there in the world and things to be part of. But it goes to my earlier point. You're only one person, and your time is only 24 hours in the day. So I'm always baffled by people who are involved in 10 things, because like when do you sleep? When do you eat? When do you have time for your partners or your friends? I would say to network, it's like be intentional, right? I mean, I think about this back when we were in person, those networking events, here goes my business card, here goes my business card. I learned over the years, I'm gonna be selective who I give my business card to, because I can't follow up with 10 people. I don't have the capacity to do that. But I give my card to 5 people, that's more meaningful because I spent time talking with them. I spent time getting to know them. And so when I think about networking, building rapport and relationship with people, it's really about like, what's the time I can give to them and get to know them as well. So, for me, it's like, I think LinkedIn's a great example. Like, I think the people that reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'm always like, I get so many requests now, especially not just where I work at now. I think about like, well, are these people that only reach out to me for this reason? So it cannot always feel as transactional. There needs to be like a more humanistic approach to it. So I think networking needs to feel like, if I want to reach out to Reagan because she works at the honors program, let me just talk to Reagan, keep in touch, let her know how am I doing, give her updates as well. That really kind of strengthens. So the next time I reach out to Reagan, oh, Jerry's the type of guy that follows up, keep in touch, want to get to not just someone, not always transactional. And I get you get a large university at UF, some things are transaction just by design because of school, but I think there's always ways to really ground that to make those meaningful connections.
Thank you. And Reagan, I saw you had unmuted yourself. If you want to say anything, please feel free to.
Oh, no, thank you. I typed it in there. I was just going to say, yes, that for those that don't know, what Jerry just said was so true, that you have to work to be the mentee as well, that takes thoughtfulness. And best of luck with everyone finding really strong mentors and then maintaining them in this way. Jerry is great at it. And if you happen to live in New York City and your mentors can visit you when they're there, that's a bonus too.
Reagan visits me in New York, and Dr. D too. Yeah, which is always a treat when they come to New York. I want to leave you guys with a couple of things, because I kind of think I just reflect on my time at UF and something that I learned as well. One of my points, like, one, it's like you do not have it all figured out. It's okay if you really don't know. Like, I don't know if I want to go to graduate school. And I think most professional programs are looking for diverse experiences before going to professional schools, but that seems to be the trend. Just okay, you can have the answer, but have a plan. It just can't be, oh, Reagan, Dr. D, I don't know what I want to do. It's like, well, let's figure it out. So there's some work on your part, right? But if you think about, well, I want to do these particular things, I'm trying to figure out how to get there. You have a plan. That's like the skeleton of it, and you're trying to kind of add the meat to it as well. So it's okay not to have everything fully baked out, but have some ideas of what you want as well. It just makes your conversation with your advisor or folks at the Graham Center just more stronger, and it strengthens it. I think number two, it's a long game. So I would say it's not so much about just like achieving all these things, that you have a full life to live. So you kind of think yourself like, I can take my time and I could try something and not like it, and that's okay. Right. So it's really the long game, right? The longer that experience, realize, oh, well, I don't really like doing this, so I'll do this. And in government, like I'm not a policy wonk. So that's why a city hall job never really spoke to me. I was more the type of guy that was like, I like agency work. I felt like it was more operational in nature. That's my personality. So like after that made sense, I kind of figured that out along my journey as well. I think the third point, I think, is really keep in touch with the people who helped to get you where you are today. I think sometimes, when we graduate from UF, like, oh, who are the advisors that really invested time in you? Because those folks, even today, when I was applying literally for Bloomberg, I said, Dr. D, like, okay, I'm applying for this job. Can I send you like my cover letter and resume? Even to this day, like as a grown 30-year-old man, I'm still sending to Dr. D. But I feel like Dr. D was like, okay, provide the perspective, or telling Reagan, I'm thinking about this career change. What are your thoughts as well? Because these are people that really care about your long-term growth. I mean, they're not going anywhere just because you left UF. They're just going to still be there for the long haul. So always keep in touch with them. And fourth, have fun. I mean, my career seems so like simplistic, but it requires a lot of hard work. And hard work that was also fun, right? So I think never underestimate how much work it takes to spend 9 years in government and meet the right people and have the stars align, but I also had fun doing it as well. I like living in New York. I have no regrets. I'll do it again. But I also think on the flip side of the fun, it's a hard work. And I would never trade the day I was in Dr. D's office for 4 hours, just like, oh my God, I cannot do no more edits. Like, we need to FedEx this to the Urban Fellows office now. She's like, but specificity, it was like, oh, please, that's enough of that word. But but it really didn't matter, because when I interviewed for Urban Fellow, they asked me, so tell us why you wrote about this. And I was prepared and everything as well. So it's all fun. And I just really encourage all of you, like if you're in your sophomore year or entering your senior year as well, just really kind of like ask yourself, what makes me happy? What keeps me up at night? What am I passionate about? And then what careers at this moment in my life kind of I could want to pursue. And then you may try it out, and people's passion change, and you meet people along the way, and you fall in love or not, or you travel the world. So life will happen, and when you least expect. And I think the pandemic was a great example. Never really thought like people would be this remote world now, and what does that mean for careers you look for? I think the future of work is very different. Do you want a career that all virtual based, remote or not? Some people hate virtual, some people love it. So kind of think about how the world is shifting a little bit.
That's such a timely conversation.
Oh, internship tips, if you have not touched on the writing. I think that's for internships, like there's so many great internships, but it takes time to apply to them. They require a resume, they require a cover letter, some essay as well. So I would say, like, where do you want to intern at? And, do you want to intern in New York at Goldman Sachs? Well, that process is more involved. They require you to have particular courses done as well. So kind of know what the baseline is for your internship as well. And secondly, I did internships when I was undergrad. I did internships in Washington, D.C., which I found valuable. I realized that D.C. is not for me, right? I think it was so hot, and it was like, I didn't really like Capitol Hill that much, and the pay was so low, it was all these things, but I kind of think I'm glad I had an internship experience to kind of show me that this is not a good, this is not what I want to do long haul. And I think internships can really provide that insight. You may have this romantic view, oh, I want to work in big banks, or I want to do this for not-for-profit, and you get there, it's like, this is not what I want to do. If this is intern, this is the culture, then I don't want to do this for the long haul as well.
So I have another question that went in the direct that has to do with internships as well. And is it realistic to expect paid internships in the nonprofit sector? What's your experience with that?
There's a real dialogue happening across industries about, especially on Capitol Hill, like one of my representative, AOC, will say like you should pay people, the idea of free labor is kind of insane because there's real cost of living. So if you're either independently wealthy, you have financial means, but then that always skews itself to a very white space, right? Because people that could be on Hill for a whole summer not getting paid, it's like people who are privileged class, all these things. So how do you really equalize it so that women or minority groups have that opportunity as well? I think if you're not for profit, that's something you have to ask yourself, do you want to work in a space that doesn't pay interns, right? It's like a value thing for me, right? So is it because the budget doesn't allow for it? Is it because it's how they're set up as well? I know personally that I just could not, like, that's why I didn't like Capitol Hill. Like, I just taking an unpaid internship was very difficult. And I think if you may not you have the financial resource or have enough scholarships to do it, then I think so you kind of reconcile as well. But if it's but I think great opportunities, will always present itself. So don't feel like, oh, I can't, this is a great opportunity, but it doesn't pay. Like, there's other great opportunities. There's not like one in the bag. So like, always keep your options open. You may think, oh, I want to work at, for example, Ford Foundation pays their intern, but like work at Ford, but they don't pay. It was like, well, there's other opportunities that can be just equally as satisfying, even maybe more dynamic, but it may not be that as well. And also about big name companies, like, I think sometimes even with mentors, I want a mentor who's like the president of this or on this board. I kind of feel like mentors that are that high level are never that effective in my mind. I think they're just so busy. They're going to give you the time you need. Same thing with some jobs. Some jobs have really big names and brands, but like to get those jobs, sometimes it's like you're applying, but they already decided who they wanted. So like, don't feel discouraged. So like, never feel like we don't live in an equal world where like we don't live in meritocracy. So you'd be surprised. Like, I've learned that very acutely. You're like, some things just happen because that's the way things are. But never discount hard work. I think when the stars align and you have the right skill set, the right opportunity will present itself. And I just continue to work hard. I continue to really keep in touch with my network as well. And it worked out for me as well. But but this idea that I'm just going to just get this at this big company, it just requires, there's other factors in play that may not be always fair or equal.
I guess kind of going off of that, there's another question in here, and it's kind of more going from the hiring perspective. I'm not sure if you had been in that position, but what do you look for in candidates? And especially, now grads that are coming out of school, what do you look for in whether it be their material or their interviews, whatever it is?
I was a manager in government, and I would say I'd rather not be a manager because managing people is a lot of work. It's really, those were the days in government. I would say, like, when I was a hiring manager and I supervised staff, I think the staff that was successful were the ones that asked great questions. Not so much questions that you could easily find on a website, but like questions like, so why is our policy on this in a particular way? Like really, really just engaging. Because I think sometimes this idea of managing up, you want someone that's going to ask the right question, help you kind of manage up a little bit as well. I think someone that's very clear why they want the job. When I read applications for Urban Fellows, and I will never forget it, someone wrote, someone asked the question in their essay, why do you want to be an Urban Fellow? They responded, because I want to move to New York. And I was just blown away that was their answer. And I kind of think there is something to be said about what you write on paper. People do read it. So if you write something that they're just like, we read everything, right? Because that's how we kind of weed people out a little bit. I think someone that's very clear on their goals, right? Because I think part of management, it's like, how do I support my employee in their professional growth? So if they tell me, Jerry, I'm going to start this job, but I hope to be a director in 4 or 5 years. What type of programs I need to put this person? How can I support this person to get where they are as well? So I think someone has a plan coming to adjust. When I came to the city, I was like, I was urban fellow, but I worked at SBS because I've never really took any business courses. So I told my manager at the time, I want to understand like what is it like to run a small business and how does government support that, right? And I had opportunity to really work with my counterparts at the Economic Development Corporation, SBS, to kind of understand that as well. So I came with a plan, and I was like, oh, that was, and okay, great. Then I transitioned over to, I went to the other side of government as well. So I think it's really important for any person, like a hiring, like this person have a plan. What's their value proposition? Are they someone who's a critical thinker? Are they a good writer? And some debates, can they write? Can they speak well? Can they present independently of me as well? Those are everything that hiring managers look for. And depends on the industry. I think they're very different as well, but I think those are the core things they look for.
Thank you. I guess kind of also going off of that, while I was, for the marketing, I did take a peek at your LinkedIn. I noticed that you did a lot of fellowships. What value have those been in your career development?
Oh, great question. So I haven't gone to graduate school. I think fellowships, graduate school is a cost. So for me, and there's fellowships out there for scholarships and all that, but one thing I learned in undergrad was like, I didn't know why I wanted to go to grad school. I started the process and I was going through the process and I was like, I just can't answer the question why. And it brought me back to my roots when Dr. D was like, specificity, why are you applying for this graduate program? What do you hope to achieve? And I went through the process and I had to be honest with myself, like, it didn't feel right. There's like a misalignment. So I think sometimes when you think about these professional schools, you have to really know why you want to go to business school, where you want to go to law school as well. And if you really can't convince yourself like why you want to go, you're not going to convince a selections committee or a review committee of why you should be part of their program as well. So fellowships has been one way for me to really remain relevant by just gaining new skill sets and understandings and experiences while also meeting new people. So that's why I did so many fellowships, because I feel like that was like my substitute to some extent for not going to graduate school as well. And I think now, I'm 31 years old, turning 32, almost 10 years of work experience. There's still opportunity for me to go back to grad school, but it has to be like the right opportunity. So I think now I'm in a place where it's like, does this grad level degree allow me to make more in my compensation, right? Or does it just allow me to gain new skill sets that I cannot gain already that I've gained in government or at philanthropies? Or what does this degree do that's going to be a change that I did before as well, without being straddled with so much debt? So I think you should have a more critiqueful conversation with yourself on why any professional school or graduate school is important to you. I think fellowships can help substitute that in the interim.
Certainly. And then another question is, where do you want to be in 5 years and then 10 years?
Yeah, so I go back to that triangle. I spent almost 9 years in government and I really loved it. I'm not sure if I'll spend 9 years at philanthropies, who knows, right? I could settle down, I could meet the love of my life, my knight in shining armor. I'm joking. I think 5 years from now, I will be 36. I hope to be in a different industry. So like, I feel like if I did government and philanthropy, it'd be business. So some examples I've been thinking about now, it's like the work that folks do at Goldman Sachs, right? They're investing in 1 million Black women, and so like maybe that gets off the ground and there's going to be some help needed down the road with that, or working for like a private bank or something in business related. So I could fulfill my triangle a little bit. That's a 5-year plan, hitting my sector of business, whatever that looks like. I think 10 years from now, I want to be retired. It's sometimes it's kind of crazy when you think about like, it's not crazy. Like people work when they retire, but it's like, I like to retire, but that's when I read too much romance novels. I retire with someone beautiful. I want to continue just working hard. So whatever industry that looks like is coming back to government or in philanthropy or business, like just continue working and maybe having a family structure. That's something I haven't really put a lot of thought into. And I think I should have put enough thought in when I was undergrad, and now I'm 31, I'm not putting a lot of thought into now, but some people know they want to have a family structure, and for me, it's like, I'm okay being a single guy in New York. So like, I think 10 years from now, that may change, but someone starts have to align and the cards have to fall in the right order.
Well, I wish you best of luck in both.
Thank you.
So we're nearing the end of the hour. If anybody has any other questions that they'd like to drop in the chat or raise their hands, this has been super insightful. All these, I think, drilling down, the word that I can take away is like specificity from this.
Oh, yes.
And it's super helpful though, because I think that, in career planning and in applying for things, I certainly face that there's so much out there, and writing, there's so much to write about, but really what's the depth versus, it's like being more specific, right? Again.
Yeah. So yeah,
But,
really just drilling down and like, and I think that will serve anyone well as you apply for anything. You can be specific and say, I'm very tailored while you're doing something. It just goes a long way to help defend to whoever has to receive that.
exactly. So thank you so much for that. If anybody else has anything to ask a question or add anything, thank you for being here.
Of course, anytime. And it's one last point. The Graham Center was a really great space and important to me. So Miriam, Dorothy, Dr. D, thanks for all that you guys have done and continue to do to really cultivate the next generation of public leaders. I mean, it's government really needs it more than ever. So it's great to be in a space that I remember the Graham Center when it was built. That's how old I am. When it was built in the inauguration for it, and Bob Graham spoke about what it meant for him to be governor, U.S. Senator, really being there for the people of Florida. And that same model of like really helping other people in a more macro way still holds true for me today.